Okay, so today we're going to get started on looking at court cases that have to do with federalism. And what I mean by that is how the federal government became more powerful than states. So right now with the coronavirus, we're hearing a lot of fighting about whether or not a governor can make these decisions for the citizens. And some people want the federal government to do more, and some people think that their state is doing too much. So right now we have some tension between the federal government and the states. So we want to look at some court cases that have to do with this. So the first thing we're going to do is look at a website that is super helpful when examining these court cases. But before we look at it, I just want to tell you that I want you to still listen to these little mini lectures, because sometimes this OYE's website is a little complicated. So I'm going to take you to it and show it to you. So it's really great if you have a Supreme Court case and you're like, I just need the facts. So you can look up cases by the case title, the justice, what the argument was, or how it's been in the news. And of course, as you look here, you can see this little search engine. You can look up a court case. So I have added into our lecture today some of these links, and I want you to be sure to check those out. So let's just go in and let's look for a case. And I'm just going to pick one here. Let's look at Bannister versus Davis. So as you can see, it gives you the name of the case, okay, the title. It gives you a little summary here. It tells you when the time frame was, when it was argued. And as you can see, our decision is pending. So this is one that just recently came before the court. Let's look at one where we have a decision. This is great, an Age Discrimination Act. Okay, so here's a case, Babb versus Wilkie, where the court is holding that the federal sector provision of age discrimination from the Employment Act of 1867 demands that a person's actions be untainted by any consideration of age. So what that means is you can't say, oh, we're not going to hire you because you're too old. So if we pull this up and look at it, I want you to just see the format here. So here again is the title of the case. It tells you who the lawyer was and who the individual is that is suing. Gives you some court information that gets a little bit more specific. But here you go. Here's what's helpful. Here's the facts of the case. So you can read all of this, and it'll give you the background. The constitutional question, which is something that every court case that comes before the Supreme Court, we need to know. So as you're looking at this, we need to know, how does this court case have to do with the Constitution? And in this case, it looks like it is protecting an employee that is 40 years old. So then here's the conclusion. So here's what's kind of cool about this. It gives you the decision. So it's an 8-1 decision for Babb. So great. You know who won. Babb won. It shows you which judges voted on which lines. Okay. The only dissenting judge was Judge Thomas. So here's the explanation as to why they ruled the way that they did. It tells you who wrote various opinions. Okay, so we have Sonia Sotomayor wrote a concurring opinion, meaning that they agreed, but that maybe for a different reason. And then Judge Clarence Thomas wrote the dissenting. He was the lone dissenter. Okay, so what's hard about this is sometimes it'll tell you, like, yes, this won, but it's not really very clear, like, well, what does that actually imply? So we don't always want to just look at this. We want to make sure that we're listening otherwise. All right, so let's get going at our case. So as you can see here, I did a hyperlink to that same web page. So if you clicked on that, it would take you right there and give you the information. So in the McCulloch versus Maryland case, the Constitution issue is, does the Constitution give Congress the power to establish a national bank? And if so, does the Constitution allow Maryland to tax that bank? So the question here is, does the state have the right to tax the federal government? Is the state as powerful as the federal government? Is it more powerful? So the background is this. The second bank of the U.S. was established by an act of Congress in 1816. And the purpose was, of course, to have a national bank so that we could be paying for our debts and also taking in money. Many states objected to the bank's policies and wanted to limit its operation because they wanted their state banks to be operating. So Maryland decided that they had a plan. They decided that they were going to tax the currency that was issued by the Baltimore branch. Now, the bank could avoid the tax if they just paid an annual fee. So it was kind of like a little membership that they would have to pay. Now, the branch cashier, who's also probably the branch manager, James McCulloch, refused to pay the tax, and he refused to pay the fee on the grounds that this was the federal government, that the state couldn't tell the federal government what they were going to do or tax them. So the state sued McCulloch, and the Maryland courts ordered him to pay. McCulloch is going to appeal the case all the way to the Supreme Court. So here's the decision. Every justice on the court agreed that the Constitution did allow Congress to establish a national bank. They also agreed that it did not allow Maryland to tax that bank. So what this means is that the federal government, if the federal government creates something or the federal government creates a law, it is supreme over the state. So the impact of this decision really creates two different major principles in law. The first one is what's called the principle of implied powers. The court greatly expanded what the Constitution allows the federal government to do. So today, an example of an implied power is the idea that Congress, as it says in the Constitution, can make laws that are necessary and proper to carry out its listed powers. So if it says that it can regulate interstate commerce, and they decide to make a new law about how commerce can move within the state, that's an implied power because they need to do that. Now, the principle of national supremacy is the federal Constitution and federal laws come before state constitutions and laws. So when the federal government is using powers that belong to it, the states must give way. So a great example of this would be recently gay marriage. In the United States, some states approved gay marriage and other states did not. And when the Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage was legal, all the states then had to have it. So that would be an example. Another really great example, which is actually on the AP test, is the United States versus Lopez. When this happened in 1995 was when it was finally ruled upon. So again, there's a hyperlink for you right here that you can click on to go to the OYE's webpage. So the question here is kind of complicated because the constitutional question is, did Congress overstep its commerce authority in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution? But when we look at the facts of the case, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with commerce. So this is a little bit confusing. So basically, Congress created a federal law of gun-free zones in 1990. When it created that, it is claiming that they can do so by using the Commerce Clause and basically saying the Commerce Clause is also known as the Elastic Clause, saying like, well, it's necessary, we need to do it. But they're using it as if it is an economic clause, meaning that it has to do with like they're regulating money within the states or trade. And that's not really what a gun-free zone is. So here's this kid. His name is Alfonso Lopez. He's a 12th grade student at a school in Texas, and he is arrested for carrying a concealed weapon into his high school. Now, he had a concealed weapon, he had the bullets, but it was not loaded at all. He claims that he was bringing the gun to school to sell it to somebody for $44, that it was not his, it was not going to be used by him in any type of crime. Now, he was going to be charged under Texas law with firearm possession on school premises. The next day, though, the state charges were dismissed after federal agents moved in and charged Lopez with violating a federal crime statute, which was the Gun-Free School Zone Act of 1990. Now, this act forbids any individual knowingly to possess a firearm at a place that he knows is a school zone. Now, you've got to be actually 1,000 feet away from a school. if you were going to be somebody who has like a carried and concealed weapon. So Lopez was found guilty at a bench trial, and he was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment and 2 years of supervised release. He is going to sue the government, and his court case is going to be heard by the Supreme Court. Now, the real question here is if establishing a gun-free zone is economic activity. Congress can use its elastic clause to make laws that it is seen as necessary and proper, but those have always been tied to the economy. Sorry about that typo. I'll fix that. The court ruled, now this is where it's complicated. The court ruled yes. Yes, what? Yes, the possession of a gun in a local school zone is not economic activity, as you might think it is. So the question is, who won? Well, in this case, Lopez wins, because it's saying that the United States government, cannot make a law at a local school claiming it's because of economic activity. So this really has nothing to do with the Commerce Act or any sort of economic activity. So over here, which really means that the enforcement of such an act comes under the authority of the state. So notice it is now the state of Florida, not the federal government, that is creating gun and drug-free zones. Now with that, the United States government does have a gun-free zone, and they have added in the hooks that they need in order to make it about interstate commerce. So today, if this were to happen again, and this individual would be charged, they would not be able to win at the Supreme Court. All right, thanks so much. Hope that was helpful. I'll get this posted.